everyone and welcome back. On my channel I've been following Conan Exiles for the past couple of months, and a few weeks ago I released a video discussing whether Conan Exiles will be a success. And from that video I received a lot of feedback as well as varying opinions about the upcoming survival game, and it got me thinking, what are the attributes that create a good survival game? Now, most survival games will generally follow the similar gameplay mechanics and include similar features, and there are many elements which come together to create a survival game, and the elements that I discuss in this video are from my own personal experiences. If you feel like I've missed anything or you have a different opinion, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are. Now, it's no surprise that the survival genre is one of the most popular genres that we see currently. If we check out some of the Steam statistics, you'll notice that survival games always rank near the top, and survival games are generally popular due to how they're designed. It's worth mentioning that the survival genre is extremely diverse and includes both single-player and multiplayer experiences, and the survival genre is actually a subgenre of the action-adventure category of games. Therefore, a lot of the mixes with survival tend to be either action or adventure orientated, and survival games can be both single-player and multiplayer focused. Single-player survival games are generally a mix between survival and another genre such as horror, and you'll find a lot of the gameplay mechanics are similar to the elements of the primary genre of survival, whereas the themes, story, and environments are more in line with the secondary genre such as horror. Generally, most survival games are centered around the definition of survival, which is to continue to live or exist, especially in spite of danger or hardship. You'll find that every survival game will include mechanics which call back to this definition, regardless if it's a single player or multiplayer game. You'll find that the concepts both refer back and are influenced by the definition of survival. Both single-player and multiplayer experiences, themes, and gameplay mechanics will differ, however both will share a commonality, which is to survive. Survival games thrive on replayability and developing continuous objectives, and by doing so it actually increases a player's level of engagement. By providing continuous objectives and allowing replayability, the player is able to invest a lot of time without experiencing boredom. You will find that most multiplayer survival games have no ending and no story, and this is primarily done by design. Multiplayer survival games generally lack story, as the game is designed to enable the player to develop their own story. By doing this, the player becomes more invested and will generally continue to play as long as they're engaged. So, as survival games are designed to keep a player engaged by providing tasks and objectives that are seemingly continuous, I have found that there are around 5 elements from my own experiences which create a survival game, and these elements include resource management, persistent threats, risk, progression, and exploration. Now, these elements coexist and work together to create a continuous cycle where the player is able to create their own experiences and their own objectives within the game world. Resource management focuses on providing tasks and objectives where the player will need to continually satisfy and maintain, and the most common example of this is the hunger and thirst system, which most survival games incorporate to varying degrees. By including a persistent threat or threats, keeps the player engaged by never allowing the player to relax, by always providing a potential problem, such as monsters that are hunting the player or other players which poses a threat. Most multiplayer survival games use other players as the persistent threat, as players are more difficult to predict and outsmart, meaning there's always a challenge. Risk is another element that is incorporated, and it's generally mixed with both the persistent threat and exploration. Risk is designed to keep a player invested by providing rewards when a player makes a decision to take an opportunity which can either lead to their success or failure. And risk is inherently addictive, and therefore it provides an additional tactic to ensure that the player is engaged within the game. A sense of progression is also required for the player to feel as if they're continually improving and progressing in their experience. The most common forms of progression we see in most survival games is incorporated into the crafting system, and you'll find that with progression, companies generally decide to incorporate a gated progression system. And a gated progression system basically means that in order to progress further, the player will need to meet specific requirements or objectives. Finally, exploration is designed to satisfy a natural curiosity that we have as humans. By providing a level of exploration, risk is naturally provided. Exploration in a survival game enables a player to make decisions and become invested by introducing new situations, and what it necessarily does is actually ties in all these factors together. As you can see, most of these elements generally work together, and they're all focused towards the definition of survival, but are generally incorporated to ensure maximum engagement of the player. If one of these elements lacks in one way or another, it inherently reduces the effectiveness of the survival game. In order for a survival game to actually work, all of these need to coexist and work well and be seamless. Now, combat would be in this list, however, combat is generally subjective depending on the survival game that you play. Single player survival horror games generally lack combat, as being able to combat your foes in a horror game will generally mean that there's no element of threat if you can fight back. And combat is an element which, depending on the type of survival game, its key themes will greatly vary. You can play a lot of good survival games which do not have the best graphics or inherently complex gameplay, but the combat in itself is relatively matching to that type of survival game. Now, as I mentioned, these are just my thoughts and opinions on the 5 elements that I think make a survival game. Now, whether or not the game becomes successful is highly dependent on how these elements are incorporated, as well as how all the other aspects such as the themes, setting, and story, as well as other key attributes, are mixed into the game as well. So on that, let me know in the comment section below what gameplay mechanics you think create a survival game. That's basically going to do it for this video, and I hope you really enjoyed the content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.